The morning mist hadn't even cleared from Pine Ridge Woods when I first caught sight of her charging through my property like she had a deed in one hand and the world in the other. Karen Whitfield, our illustrious HOA president, was out there snapping photos, phone up like she was catching rare birds, documenting every tent, every truck, every last thing that didn't fit her idea of suburban perfection. Her bleach blonde hair was bouncing with every determined step, and I swear she looked almost gleeful as she slapped a bright orange fine notice right on the old oak tree by the entrance. She took a step back, hands on hips, admiring her work like she'd just planted the flag on the moon. Then, for good measure, she announced in that high-carrying voice of hers that this was now an unauthorized camping zone and in direct violation of community standards. She probably figured all the wildlife cared as much as she did. But here's the thing, she didn't have the first clue what she'd just barged into. Every inch she'd marched across was actually a federally sanctioned military training ground. And well, she'd just made herself guilty of federal trespassing. My name's Marcus Reynolds, Colonel. Marcus Reynolds, technically, though these days I'm just another guy in jeans and muddy boots. Retired after 25 years in the service, I came back about 6 months ago to my old family land at the edge of Willowbrook Estates. 100 acres of woods just outside the HOA's official boundary lines. My grandfather bought it back in '52, and it's stayed in the family ever since. What nobody outside a handful of folks knew was that, for the last 15 years, the Department of Defense has used sections of the property for small off-the-grid training exercises, nothing explosive, nothing Hollywood, just survival training, map reading, and team building for special ops. The kind of deal the DoD worked out with my dad long before any HOA was even a twinkle in a real estate developer's eye. I made sure the boundaries were clear posts every 50 feet, bold red signs reading private property, no trespassing nailed up for anyone with eyes to see. But Karen Whitfield, she considered herself the grand guardian of suburban order, 3 years running as HOA president, and in that time she'd fined people for mailbox colors, too long grass, garbage cans left out an hour too late. You name it. So when we started getting ready for one of our quarterly training sessions and the military vehicles rolled in, tents went up, everything done by the book, well, it stuck out like a sore thumb among all the picket fences and nosy neighbors. Didn't take long for the HOA's automated system to start pinging my phone with friendly reminders about community appearance standards. At first, I just shrugged it off, figured the folks running the show would check their maps and realize the property was outside their kingdom. But if you think Karen's the kind of person who lets things go, you haven't met her. 2 days later, an official notice showed up taped to my front door, printed on HOA letterhead, signed by Karen herself, informing me I was in violation of Section 12.3 of the bylaws, unauthorized camping temporary structures, $500 fine, due in 30 days. You know what I mean? She had the nerve to print it in bold. So I tried the diplomatic approach. Next morning, I headed over to her house McMansion at the top of the hill, tastefully overdone in every way possible. She answers the door decked out in this blazer, with HOA president embroidered on the pocket, looking like she was auditioning for some reality show. Didn't even let me say good morning before launching into this speech about protecting property values and the sanctity of neighborhood standards. I let her finish. She'd clearly practiced, and told her calmly that my property was outside her jurisdiction, that the DoD had approval, and if she wanted to see the paperwork, I'd show her. She laughed. Actually laughed like I'd told her I was hosting Navy SEALs and circus elephants out back. Rules are rules, she said, and nobody's above them. If you don't take it all down in 72 hours, I'll have to escalate. 3 days later, she escalated, big surprise. Only now she brought back up 2 other board members doing what she called a community safety inspection. Translation: they trespassed right onto my land, snapping pictures, trying to peek inside storage containers, acting like they were investigating a crime scene. They didn't realize my security cameras were picking up every second. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, old friend from my Army days, specializes in property law, and when he heard the story, he just started laughing. Not only are they out of line, he said they're probably breaking federal law themselves. He told me to send a cease and desist letter, and I did heavy on the legalese just for her. But if you're guessing Karen backed down, yeah, not a chance. It's almost like the letter emboldened her. The whole mess came to a head the following Tuesday. We had 20 guys out in the woods mid-drill working navigation exercises. Karen comes marching in, phone out, recording, voice raised, shouting about bylaws and how we're setting a terrible example. She's so busy recording she walks right past the military training in progress signs. One of my sergeants goes up polite as can be, tells her she's got to leave for her own safety. She gets even louder. I'm the HOA president. You people need to get off this land. And then she goes for broke calls. 911 tells the operator there are armed squatters refusing to comply with HOA regulations. Let me back up a sec. If you've never had the county sheriff's office show up to a military training site because the HOA president called you a squatter, you haven't really lived. 2 patrol cars, roll-up lights on. The second they see the DOD placards, meet my command staff, the whole tone changes. The lead officer, a veteran himself, radios for a supervisor while my lieutenant hands over the official paperwork. Karen, meanwhile, is standing there sputtering, trying to explain how she's just enforcing the rules. The officers walk her through it. She's on private property outside HOA boundaries in the middle of a sanctioned federal training ground. By the time they explain that not only is she not in charge here, but she's just committed criminal trespass on a secure federal site, her face goes through about 7 shades of red. She tries to argue claims the HOA has jurisdiction over all properties in the area, and the supervisor just shakes his head, tells her federal law beats HOA rules every time. Then he says very calmly that interfering with military operations is a felony. Her eyes get wide, like maybe for the first time she realized she might be in real trouble. They escort her off my property with a formal warning, one more stunt, and she's getting arrested, no second chances. She's muttering the whole way about property values and community standards, but the deputies aren't interested, and you'd think that'd be the end of it, right? Nope. News spreads fast in Willowbrook Estates. By that evening, every phone in the neighborhood was lighting up. The HOA Facebook group, normally a stream of Karen's posts about weed height and paint colors, went completely silent for a full day, which was weird enough to get people talking. Next morning, I get a call from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. They want copies of my security footage, all HOA correspondence, the whole timeline. They tell me it's routine, but you could tell there was real concern. Her little inspection had wandered way too close to classified territory. That night, the HOA board calls an emergency meeting. I show up with a folder full of documents ready for war. Community centers packed, every seat taken, people standing in the back. For once, Karen's not running the show. The Vice President, Thomas Chen, a reasonable guy, opens the meeting by talking about serious concerns and potential legal exposure. When it's my turn, I lay it all out. DOD agreement, the cease and desist letter, and just for good measure, a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office listing the charges the HOA and Karen could face if they keep pushing $250,000 fines, 5 years in prison, the whole deal. The room is dead quiet. Thomas turns to Karen, asks if she has anything to say. She stands up looking about 10 sizes smaller than usual, tries to say she was just doing her job protecting the community, blah, blah. But every board member, one after the other, points out she was told over and over the land wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and she ignored it. The vote isn't even close, unanimous. Karen's out suspended as HOA president pending a full investigation. They apologize to me in front of everyone and put it in writing that my land isn't subject to HOA rules. Now that ought to have been the end, right? But no 2 weeks later, Karen gets a formal notice from the U.S. Attorney's Office. No jail time, but she's fined $25,000 for trespassing and interfering with military ops. She reads the letter on her front lawn and, according to the neighbors, spends the next hour screaming about constitutional rights into her phone. You'd think that'd be rock bottom, but you know what I mean? With people like her, there's always another twist. In a last-ditch effort to save face, she goes on social media posts a rant about being persecuted for defending the neighborhood. But in her genius attaches pictures she took on my property photos that show restricted military equipment and personnel. By sunset, her post is flagged by federal authorities as a security breach. The next day, agents show up at her door with a second fine, $50,000 for unauthorized photography and distribution of images from a secure military site. Last anyone saw of her, she was sitting on her front steps, holding both fine notices, face white as chalk, muttering about just trying to enforce the rules. Funny thing is, after all, that the neighborhood feels different, quieter, maybe a little more respectful of boundaries. But people still argue about it online. Was Karen a menace or just overzealous? Was the HOA protecting the community or picking fights it couldn't win? I'll let you decide, because honestly out here the line between justice and overreach is just as crooked as an old country fence. What about you? Have you ever had to deal with someone like Karen? Whose side are you on when rules clash with common sense? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to share your own stories, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every community's got a Karen, and every Karen's got a lesson to teach.